how is reporting going to change based on what's happened with Trump?
I think we've already seen how it changed candidate behavior in seeing how the Democrats running for the nomination are presenting themselves on social media. You notice that there are a lot of videos of Democrats like in their kitchen. It's like, I'm Elizabeth Warren, I'm drinking a beer in my kitchen. I'm Christian Gillibrand, I'm working out. Hello? Yeah, I think she posted a bench press video yesterday or the other day. And so I think there's an effort, there's an understanding that even though Trump was perpetually dishonest, his manner, his style made him seem authentic because of the way, he seems like he's just talking, just a guy. And so Democrats are trying to mimic that a little bit. I think for the media, there have been a bunch of lessons learned. I think one is that you can't just surrender all of your airtime or like a huge percentage of your airtime to one candidate. Trump dominated airtime on CNN and elsewhere in the 2016 primary. And I think you see now, like CNN has given a town hall to a bunch of Democratic candidates, even lesser known ones. I think there will be more fact checking this time around. And I think there's a quiet understanding that the overwhelming focus on Clinton's email scandal or controversy, which received coverage way more than any particular Trump scandal or controversy combined, was an issue. And so I think there'll be an effort to have more balance in that respect this time around. But it's hard to know how it's going to play out.
What I'm curious to hear from you is why you believe the traditional media has so largely avoided a truth-centric model for political journalism, and what will it take to actually prompt a shift in this direction where journalists are using the practices you've recommended they take?
I think some of it is just people do what they're used to. And so the traditional model for years has been like, you quote the candidate, you quote the other side, and you call it a day. And I think I realized, and the Star realized with Rob Ford, that's not going to cut it when you have someone lying this much. And I think the US media has been slow to come to that realization, although there has been a change. I think some of it comes from high levels. It's not individual reporters. It's the editor-in-chief or it's the CEO, the business person being like, if we call Trump a liar, people are going to call us biased. We're going to lose subscriptions. People are going to be yelling at us. So don't, it's just not what we do. And I've had people, like I was on a panel with the executive editor of the Associated Press, who's really smart, but she was talking about why they won't use the word lie, and they often won't even say false claim. Like, well, our job is to be down the middle, and so pointing out the objective truth that a politician is saying a lot of things that aren't true is still widely seen, I think, by people at high levels in media organizations as a departure from objectivity, when my argument is that it's not. So there has been a shift, more people use lie, more people are fact-checking in their stories, but I think we still have a long way to go.
Thank you.
Social media has become such a big part of the way journalists operate, and it's usually the main way that they get their communication forward, and you've obviously taken that in stride, and it's helped you greatly in your career and everything. I just wanted to ask, what are some of the mistakes and the missteps that journalists take when conveying their information primarily through social media platforms?
One is that social media makes it so easy to depart from the tone that we should aspire to as journalists, detached, factual. You want to show that you're funny. Often that means, being snarky. And I think it can undermine faith in your neutrality or objectivity if you depart from that kind of tone. So I think that can be an error, and I've done that too. There are tweets where I've strayed from factual to mocking, and I always regret that. I think an error is letting it dominate your time. Twitter is in many ways unrepresentative of the wider world. We know that something I think it's 11% of Americans have Twitter. And so if you spend a lot of time there, and especially if you let it shape your views on what's going on in politics, you can misperceive what's going on. For example, I think of there's this war in my Twitter mentions and elsewhere on Twitter between Bernie Sanders supporters and people who loved Hillary Clinton, and that's still happening. They're still fighting it out, and you'd think from that Bernie has diehard fans, but other people hate him. But if you look at the Democratic primary polls, like every single poll shows that Bernie Sanders is very popular with a huge number of Democrats. It's not just the diehards. These are people who voted for Hillary Clinton. They like Bernie Sanders. And so I think, Twitter and social media more broadly are helpful in many ways, but you can't let it become a mental bubble for you, or else you'll miss something.
Thank you.
How do you relax after a long day of Trump tweets?
So I take a lot of naps, and I work from home, so I have a bed in my office, which is helpful when you're covering Donald Trump. I watch a lot of basketball. I love the Raptors. I do karaoke very badly. I go, like, something I had to make sure I did in the first year, especially working from home, was making sure that I left my apartment, because with Donald Trump, if you work from home, you can just never leave. Like, I would go 2 and 3 days without experiencing fresh air. I said this to the class earlier today, and then I'd go outside in like downtown Washington. I'd be like, oh, this air is beautiful. And I resolved to never think that downtown air is beautiful. So I make sure that I have some sort of life outside of Trump.
Just regarding your statements, you didn't call Trump out as a fearmonger. You didn't say he was spreading hate. You kept it as the objective misinformation. We just saw MAGA supporting populist murder Muslims in New Zealand from falling into this, from tuning in to all the lies. Where do you see the real separation, and when do you, so you're calling out lies, why won't you call out hate?
That's interesting. I actually do. I think there have been moments where Trump has, especially during the 2016 campaign, where he has objectively campaigned to foment anti-Muslim bigotry. And I think I've been one of the most aggressive reporters in pointing that out. One example was, like, I was in South Carolina during the South Carolina primary in February 2016, when he started telling the story about an entirely fictional massacre of Muslims by a US general in the Philippines in the early 1900s, General Pershing, saying that he ordered this massacre of 49 Muslims with bullets dipped in pig's blood, and then he sent the 50th person, go back to your people and tell them what happened. And then Trump concluded, like, basically, we need to get smart and tough like that, to combat terrorism. And to me, like, that is objective anti-Muslim bigotry, when you're telling a fake story about massacring people in a way that's most religiously offensive. That's Islamophobic. And so I have pointed that out. I think in some cases things are more ambiguous, but I don't think I've been especially shy about noting this.
Cool. Thank you.
You mentioned that even in most crowded media environments, there are some niches to be filled. In your opinion, what are some areas in journalism that need more reporters?
I think there's so many. I mean, a lot of the traditional political coverage that has been done by big outlets is being done less these days because of budget cuts. And there's been good reporting on the decline of reporting at provincial legislatures. There are tons of city halls, town councils, school boards especially, that are going, all these important public institutions that affect people's lives. Often there's no one at the meeting. And so I think you can start there. I think something I encourage young journalists to do is just look around your own community, even if it's not related to politics or government. There are probably things that are happening that are interesting and worth writing about, but not being covered. But even like traditional reporting, I think the basics are often not being done. So I'd point to that first.
So just as a follow-up question, would you argue that local and traditional journalism is not being given the importance that it was given before? Yeah,
I think reporting of all kinds, local and international. Like the Star has, I'm in the last foreign bureau of the Toronto Star. We used to have a Jerusalem correspondent, a London correspondent. For a while we had a Beijing and Delhi correspondent. We had someone in Latin America maybe 20 years ago, I think in Mexico City. And now it's only Washington. And we also had people around Canada. We had someone in this part of Canada. We had someone out west. That is gone. And so I think every level, local, provincial, international, has all declined. And I think there are voids there to be filled at all levels.
So I know that you said that you do fact-checking sort of outside of your primary reporting job. How long does it take you to fact-check one of Trump's speeches?
It depends on the speech. So some of them, when he's on script, he doesn't lie as much. And so his staffers take a lot of criticism, maybe some warranted, like people like Stephen Miller, Kellyanne Conway. But I can tell you with some authority after watching him, it's not his staffers for the most part that are putting lies in his speeches. It's when Trump looks up and he gets that Trump look and he starts being Trump again. That's when the lies come, and that's when I sort of perk up. And so some speeches, like where he knows he has to be on script, where it's something solemn, there's been a tragedy, I don't know. Often I can fact check that in a couple minutes because I can tell that's all fine. I was at the Conservative Political Action Conference a few weeks ago, CPAC in Washington. He spoke for, I think, 2 hours and 12 minutes or 2 hours and 2 minutes. It was his longest speech ever. And I counted 60 false claims in that one speech. That took me like an entire, more than a day, because I had to wait for people to respond to me. You know, I was sending out queries to experts. And so it can take a really long time when he's just being Donald Trump.
Thank you.
How much sleep do you get?
It depends. I would say I average like, I would say 6 hours. I would like to get 8 hours, like a lot of us we're doing various jobs. So I'm functioning, but it's not as much as I'd like.
Since you've gotten to Washington and gained notoriety on that page, do you feel the lies have slowed down at all?
No, they've increased. It's accelerated. So, you know, in 2017, it was 2.9 false claims per day. In 2018, it was over 8. I think it was 8.6. Now his average for the whole term is 5.9, 6 a day. And a lot of that, I did like a statistical study, you know, because someone asked me, is he just talking more? Or is he lying more per word? So I did the first study of what I call his dishonesty density. And found that, so he is talking a lot more, and there's a strong correlation between how much he talks and how much he lies, but his dishonesty density has also increased. And my theory is that he's become more comfortable, and so he's going off script much more. Early in his presidency, he would often just, it's hard to remember, but he would just read the script, and now he feels free, and so he's just saying stuff, and so he's lying.
Does it ever get discouraging to you?
It doesn't, because, you know, for a lot of the reasons I said in the speech, but also because I never saw my job as like changing Donald Trump's behavior. My thought has been, this is how this man is and is going to be. And so voters need the information for this to be, you know, a functioning democracy. People need to know the facts. So I've never once thought, like, if I do this enough, he's going to stop lying. It just never crossed my mind.
All right, thank you.
Considering the political and the media situation in the United States today, what would be your take on a voucher system as suggested by McChesney and Nichols in the United States in particular?
What kind of voucher system?
They suggested like giving citizens a citizen voucher they could spend to fund independent media and to kind of save in-depth journalism.
That's interesting. Honestly, I haven't thought enough. I don't know enough about it to have an opinion. I think we need creative solutions for independent media and even traditional media, because everyone's struggling. And the cut. I saw a Pew study that 45% of either journalism jobs or print journalism jobs have been lost since 2007. 45%, and so it's a big problem. But I don't know enough about that one.
What advice would you give to us in fact-checking and just being a journalist in general, as someone that is entering this environment, this career in such a turbulent area? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so on fact-checking, I would say anyone can do it. There's no real art to this. I think it's even one of the easier forms of reporting. You know, you don't have to write, you don't have to craft a beautiful feature with beautiful structure and things that I still, you know, struggle with a lot of the time. You know, it's finding out what's true and telling people. And so if you can do any kind of reporting, you know, anyone, you know, with an internet connection and a willingness to call people, to contact people, can fact check. And I know that like everyone in public life that I've encountered lies less than Donald Trump. So it's not like there's a need as pressing as there was with Trump, you know, in your local Fredericton government or whatever. But fact checking often doesn't happen elsewhere. It's not just Washington. This often is not done. And so, you know, if you get a job you know, or even if you're working for your campus paper or you get a job for the local paper or community weekly, it's something you can do. And I also encourage people not to see it as as a separate activity. You know, you don't need to write a fact check column. You just in your regular coverage, you can incorporate elements of fact checking into it. So that's what I'd say. On being a journalist in general, you know, there's so much I could say. It stresses me out thinking about you guys trying to enter the industry. Like when I got hired by the Star, they hired 5 people at once. It was September 2008. It was right before the big crash. And they hired 5 of us. And that has literally never happened again. Now it's like, well, they'll take an intern and they'll give them a contract and they'll string you along for a while. And then maybe they'll be like, okay, we'll hire you full time. And it's worse elsewhere. And so I'd say, you know that it's going to be a challenge. I would say, as I said earlier in the class, I got into this. I was a business student, and I only got into this because I sent dozens of letters to small papers all around Canada. I was like, I don't have the experience to get a job at the Toronto Star or an internship at the Toronto Star. I applied, you know, to the Yukon, to Alberta, out east, everywhere, and I got one phone call from an editor who was willing to give me an internship covering sports, because that's what I covered on campus. And if I didn't get that phone call, you know, I wouldn't have started. You know, maybe I would have quit. And so I'd say, one, you know, if you don't get that break right away, it doesn't mean you're bad. It doesn't mean you don't have what it takes. Maybe you need more experience. Maybe you need you need to contact someone else who will give you that phone call. So don't think it reflects on you if it doesn't work right away. And I would say, like, you know, if you have to really want it with the state of the industry the way it is. But if you really want it, I would say keep pressing as much as you can financially. Like maybe it means not working in journalism for a while, but getting some other jobs so you can live and pay your rent, but continuing to look around the country for openings. And so I'd say if you really want to do it, you can do it, even though it's even stressful to me thinking about you guys trying to do it.
Like, what should young student journalists such as myself or anyone else look for in this new age, since more and more jobs aren't as common?
Well, so first I'd say look everywhere. Be willing. Try not to be rooted to a particular place, because any particular region has many fewer jobs than everywhere. So be willing to uproot your life, I'd say. Look for a foot in the door. Even if you want to be a sports reporter, there might be an internship as a copy editor. You might want to do that, because once they know you, there might be more opportunities. You can pitch stories there. I'd say, to make it in this era, there's such limited supply of jobs. I still meet journalism students who are I don't really read the paper. I don't really follow the news intensely. You have to be on it. You have to be really good, as engaged as you can be. And I'd say also, as I alluded to in the speech, try to look for a niche that isn't being filled to distinguish yourself. Even if it's on, you don't have a job right now, it's on your own blog or website, something going on in Fredericton or in your own area that isn't being covered, that you can make yourself the expert on. The more you can separate yourself from the pack of generalists and show that, you can develop a beat for yourself, or you can be an expert on an area, I think the better chance you have of standing out.
Thank you.
Write for your campus paper, that woman said. That's what I did, and that's, yeah, I would add that. Any opportunity you have to write for any community paper, campus paper, the more experience you have, it's helpful.
It seems to me that much of what you said is based on the premise that people in the U.S. at least have lost their trust in the conventional media. Could you explain why that happened?
I think it's complicated. I think some of it is rooted in actual problems with traditional media. You'll have people say, the media helped lead us into the Iraq War. The media told us that everything was fine with the housing market, and then I lost my house. And so we got things wrong. There are problems, or even you hear from members of different ethnic or religious communities, people in the media don't reflect me. The media is all white. There's no one who looks like me at big papers. How can they tell the stories in my community? I think there are real issues. I think a lot of it in the U.S. though is rooted in political partisanship and a kind of tribalism, where that's different from here. Here, I think I looked in the last election, there was an Angus Reid poll that was 2/3 of Canadians were willing to consider more than one party. people were not decided voters even a few weeks before the election. In the US, every presidential election now starts like 46, 46. You know, people are on a team, and so they've attached themselves to this team, and on the right, you know, people on that team have told them, don't believe all these guys. You know, they're all liberals. They hate people like you. They hate your guns. They hate your religion. And I'm the real truth teller. And I think for certain kinds of people, that's been a persuasive message. And so, like, it's not like brainwashing, but people have been persuaded over many years by talk radio, by Fox, not to trust us. And I think that's been a successful effort.
I'm wondering if you could comment on the extent to which you think this approach, this truth-centric fact-checking approach in journalism, has taken hold in Canadian journalism. That's one question. And my second question is, I was really glad that you mentioned about civility and lack of it, and the tendency to be snarky and so on in social media. And I'm just wondering if there is a risk, this is again, I don't know, by using the word lies, that now we have people accusing other people of lies when they're not lies. I mean, the whole lie thing gets out of control too sometimes. So.
Yeah, those are good questions. In Canada, so I don't want to dodge. I've been away from Canada for 4 years now. And to the extent that I'm following the coverage, you know, I follow as a citizen, but it's mostly to follow like the bilateral issues. So I don't exactly know. I still sense a fair bit of reluctance to do this kind of thing when it comes to federal or provincial politics. And so I think it could take root much more than it has. That's my sense. But again, I don't feel like I'm an expert on the Canadian media landscape. On, you know, blowback to the word lie and stuff, I think we understand, you know, covering the US, there's going to be blowback to anything you do. The Trump side especially tries to weaponize any word, and they take their cue from Trump. You know, so he accuses Saturday Night Live of collusion because he wants to muddle the meaning of the word collusion. You know, Hillary Clinton said, "You're a puppet for Putin." He said, "You're the puppet." And so when we accuse him of lying, he and his supporters accuse us of lying, and they'll seize on any little slip up, and see, we told you, you know, it's the media, not Trump, that is the liar here, and so that is going to happen. But I think that's going to happen no matter what vocabulary we choose. You know, if you fact check him and just say that's false or that's a falsehood, people are still going to accuse you of various things. So I just think we might as well do it anyway.
Retreat from traditional medias, different outlets, less correspondence. To what extent that circumstance and maybe sort of a siloing effect with new access to, say, the internet and blogs and stuff might potentially combine to create a trust issue, just as a sort of made-up circumstance. So if I'm really into foreign policy and I learn somewhere that, oh, like Armenia and Azerbaijan are going at it, this is super important, and then I go to like New York Times or the Globe and Mail and I see nothing. And then, oh, wait, they don't care about people dying, perhaps. And then I conclude, therefore, the media has something to hide or is untrustworthy. So to what extent there's this sort of like increasing availability of alternative sources combined with perhaps this inability for a variety of factors to have the breadth of reporting there once was that may contribute to a lack of trust?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it quite like that, but I think that's very possible. And I think it might be what we're seeing, you know, on issues like immigration, for example. You know, a lot of people on the right are like, the mainstream media is not covering this issue. You know, we've had this, you know, these hordes of people are coming into the country and the New York Times isn't going to tell me about it. And so they'll turn to a Breitbart, for example, that focuses on that issue. And so I think, yeah, the more gaps you have in traditional coverage, it's like, I don't think, you know, the Trump base, the concern is like a decline in foreign coverage. But I think the general principle, I think you might well be right. You know, the less we do, the more that, you know, alternative outlets that may not be as fact-based can rise to fill the void.
So, speaking about lying, I lied, because I have a question. I'm going to get the last question. If you had a chance to sit down with Trump, what is the one question you would ask him?
I don't know. That's one of the, like, people ask me this and I never have an answer, and I'm like, I'm going to prepare so the next time I'm asked, I don't know. But I think what I would do is try to make it an interview centered on his repeat lies. Like, let's go down the list here, because he's never challenged. And so I'd say, what about this? What about this? And I'd be more adversarial, I would hope, than everyone has been so far.
Yeah, great. So I'd like to call on Sarah Morin. She's the editor-in-chief of The Aquinian, our newspaper, to formally thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight. And I think I speak for all of the young journalists in the room when I say that I aspire to be as badass of a fact checker as you are.
Thank you.
And Donald Trump called himself the Michigan Man of the Year. And in my mind, you're the Fredericton Man of the Year. So that's why we
means so
have
much to me.
this lovely gift.